This is the 5-minute guide to the USS Northampton, a heavy cruiser of the United States Navy.
So the USS Northampton was the lead ship of her class, named after the city of Northampton, which was in Massachusetts, being the home of former President Calvin Coolidge. For the technical specifications of the ship, please see the video about the class in general just uploaded. She was commissioned in 1930 and originally classified as a light cruiser because of her thin armour, but later reclassified as a heavy cruiser because of her 8-inch guns. Appropriately given her name, the Northampton was laid down in 1928 by Bethlehem Steel in the port of Quincy, which was also in Massachusetts. After completion, she joined the Atlantic Fleet and was sent to the Mediterranean during the summer of 1930 before being recalled to take part in the fleet training schedule, which took her to the Caribbean, the Panama Canal Zone, and occasionally into the Pacific for various exercises with other cruisers and with larger fleets. After this year of excitement, she was reallocated and operated primarily in the Pacific from 1932, becoming one of 6 ships to receive the new prototype RCA CXAM radar in 1940. Fortunately for her, the Northampton was at sea escorting the carrier USS Enterprise during the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor and ended up returning to port the next day. A couple of days later, that same task force sortied to search northeast of Oahu, then south to Johnston Island, and then north again to the west of Liansiki Island, possibly, and Midway Atoll in an attempt to locate the Japanese task force or any ships they might have left behind. During this search, the USS Craven was damaged when it collided with the Northampton during an underway refueling. These searches for Japanese ships continued until January 1942, when the ship was detached alongside the USS Salt Lake City to bombard the island of Voche, I think, on the 1st of February. The bombardment not only demolished buildings and fuel dumps on the island, but also sank 2 Japanese ships. A similar assault was launched against Wake Island on the 24th of February, and despite serious enemy counterfire, the guns of the Northampton and the other ships with her started large fires on the island and sank a dredging ship in the lagoon. As the Northampton retired from the island, enemy seaplanes, land-based planes, and patrol craft all attacked, but she was able to destroy or repulse all the incoming enemies. After a number of similar operations, the Enterprise's task force, which included the Northampton, joined the USS Hornet for the Doolittle raid on Tokyo on the 18th of April. The replenishment they needed after this rather long mission meant they just about missed out on the Battle of the Coral Sea, but the task force would be available for the Battle of Midway, where obviously the American forces managed to sink 4 carriers of the Japanese Navy. In mid-August, the Northampton sailed for the Southwest Pacific to join the Guadalcanal campaign, where on the 15th of September her force was attacked by the submarine I-19, which sank the USS Wasp, damaged the USS North Carolina, and sank the USS O'Brien just 800 yards off the Northampton's bow, so they dodged a bit of a bullet there. During the Battle of the Santa Cruz Islands on the 26th of October, the Northampton went to try and aid the USS Hornet, which had been mortally wounded by Japanese strike aircraft, and she provided anti-aircraft fire whilst also attempting to take the carrier under tow. Unfortunately, the carrier was doomed and was later sunk by destroyer torpedo and gunfire, and the American force retired to the southwest. The Northampton next operated with a combined cruiser-destroyer force in an attempt to prevent the Japanese reinforcing their troops on Guadalcanal. This led to the Battle of Tassafaronga, which began 40 minutes before midnight on the 30th of November, with an American force of 5 cruisers and 4 destroyers ambushing a force of 8 Japanese destroyers using radar. Thanks to the element of surprise, one of the Japanese destroyers was quickly hit and sunk, and the rest of the Japanese destroyer force didn't actually return fire for 7 or 8 minutes. Unfortunately, when they did, it turned into a little bit of an Oprah show, sort of, you get a torpedo, and you get a torpedo, and you get a torpedo. Everyone gets torpedoes. These, of course, being the feared long lance torpedoes, 2 of the American cruisers took hits very quickly within the space of a minute, and 10 minutes later a 3rd cruiser was hit. All of these ships were then forced to retire from the action. This left the Northampton along with the cruiser USS Honolulu and the remaining destroyers to continue the fight. Close to the end of the engagement, the Northampton was struck by 2 torpedoes almost simultaneously, which tore a huge hole in her port side, ripping away entire decks and bulkheads. It also resulted in flaming oil spraying all over the ship, which as you imagine might be somewhat inconvenient, and she took on water rapidly and began to list. 3 hours later, as she began to sink by the stern, she had to be abandoned and the survivors were picked up by destroyers. Now, tactically, this battle was an utter disaster. You had 3 cruisers heavily damaged and the Northampton itself lost in exchange for 1 Japanese destroyer, despite that initial advantage in firepower and surprise. However, the Japanese force did not make their supply drops and were forced to turn back, so the Japanese forces on the islands had been denied a major reinforcement, albeit at significant cost to the United States Navy.
That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. If you have a comment or a suggestion for a ship to review, let us know in the comments below.